Hello, YouTube friends and the rest of the internet that chooses or finds my videos occasionally. Hello. And I feel again compelled, and this is compelled to make an appeal almost. If you have some input and help me out on this, I'd like you to help me out on this. Leave a comment, help me out on this. And you know that on my channel, I'm always referring to an aspect of our inner world, my inner world. I'm a painter. I am focused on the inner world. Interestingly, the idea of producing art has a great deal of reference is the external world, but ultimately the irony or the beauty in art really lies with that wonderful connection to an inner life that a person has. This is what we gain. This is something that we appreciate when we look at art. We love to look at something that is coming from the what is that deep inner world in an artist. And I have a certain kind of conflict or puzzlement. It's more of a puzzlement that I have. And when I talk about the stuff on YouTube, I don't really get into much of the art. You see the art behind me, work that I produce, and I'm not really too keen on discussing it. I love talking about art, but I'm not too keen about discussing it because quite often when people feel they have access to your intellect or the verbal part of an artist, the jig is up. It's over. It's people feel that, oh, they get it all, and it's better to be mysterious in order for it to be interesting to a person. So this is my advice to younger artists. Don't talk about your art. Just let people come up to with their own explanations. It's much more advantageous to you. I don't tell people anything anymore. I have to talk to people that I know and other artists I have discussions with, and I reveal myself through my words and my intellect, but let it speak for itself, I suppose. But here is my puzzlement. And it has to do with, regardless of my comments on art, art is always inspirational to me, but the idea that there is something locked up, what I find to be quite prevalent is this sense I have that something on the inner world is quite locked up. Locked up in the sense that I suspect it wants to come out, but it is restricted. It's restricted. And what it is that I've been talking about, which seems really obvious to people, say, well, you're saying the obvious, why bother saying it? Well, sometimes the most obvious thing is the thing that you need to talk about. And that is when we are incapable or unwilling to act according to this inner strength that each person has to decide to do the right thing. And people do this without necessarily thinking about it. You don't have to say, oh, I gotta do the right thing, but I have to tell you, most people need to put it into their frontal lobes in order for, and I find this myself as a good example, I have to say to myself, well, what am I going to do in this situation? I reflect on it. And if I don't have the instinct or the impulse, I say, is this the right thing to do? So the idea of doing the right thing seems like the obvious conclusion in terms of our actions, but it's the least followed. And this is why we have a culture that is trapped. And I believe, I am convinced that our conscience is trapped in mythologies. Or just, yes, I was just listening to a person giving a dissertation and predicting the future. Well, I predict that the future is going to be goddamn miserable unless people begin to activate their conscience. That's what I think. That's what I think. My prediction for the future, it's going to be suffering and miserable. And we're trapped in the mythologies of all these built up truths and mythologies and just the outright suffering that is capturing our spirit. and what is the most likely thing to get us out of all the muck, all the mucky muck that we are facing on a day-to-day level and on a collective human level, is that this is not, for some reason, it's not being activated. And people love to go into their explanations. I just listened to a lady that calls herself Seven, like 7 of 9 in Star Trek. She has like the 7 predictions on Alfred Levermont Weber, who I have no interest in whatsoever, other than keeping my finger on the pulse to see where these types are going, where these mythological, these alien connected types are. And I'm not saying there aren't aliens and weird shit going down, but you see, we can't change any of that unless we change ourselves. To make proclamations about the nature of our reality is totally insignificant if we can't act on in a day-to-day sense of doing the right thing and risking. Now, I believe that people that, even on the Weber guy, this woman, she risks. She's a targeted individual, and I'm convinced there are targeted individuals, people who are killed for speaking out, just speaking out. And we know this happens in history, that the artists and the intellectuals are always the first to go in a change of government. When a brutal government, the Nazis in Germany came in and they burned all the books and they rounded up the artists and the people of conscience and they get rid of them. This is a risky business when we start to contact that part of ourselves, and me even speaking on YouTube, like so many others, well, I don't know how many, but there are people out there who risk, but I feel to some extent, the right we have to express our opinions is still within the culture that we live in. Appears, I guess until you get too dangerous, appears to be all right. So what I'm saying is, I am not compliant in this culture, what I call the culture of death, during an age that I call the age of fission, which started in 1938 when they split the atom, a completely unknown aspect in the cosmos for humanity anyway. As far as we know, nowhere else do we see anything, the atom being split in fission. So my point is, this continuous entrapment we're pursuing something that is external to us. And I understand that reality exists. We exist as physical beings, but there is this magnificent connection that we have to a mystery. This mystery cannot be solved through what goes on between the ears. It doesn't work that way. The mystery cannot be solved that way. It's solved through this. I suppose this is my formula. This is how I look at it, that the mystery is solved by getting in touch with that part in us, which is the highest part. And when I say solved, I'm not saying that we're going to have the answer. I'm saying that we're going to be in balance with in some way. And this part in us that has not been active for as long as recorded history, except for pockets, is a collective conscience, needs to be developed. And without this, we're lost. No matter how insightful or how clever you are, like the Cliff Highs, the predictions by these people, or the people that come on to Levermont Weber and the beautiful dissertations that they give on revealing the nature of our reality, what's the point? What's the point? We're not going to be controlled by the reptiles and the bastards if we act our conscience. But as long as we comply by going along with this external world that is being created for us, not by us, which is why I love artists and the idea of art, well, love some artists, the idea is that we create our own story. We're not in the headlights of that which is outside of us being created for us. I seem to have to reiterate this, maybe as a kind of what is that, to remind myself. But I would love to hear, yeah, if you have a comment, why is it that this aspect of us that I refer to and many others have referred to as conscience, which is not consciousness. Consciousness is everything. I have said this. Consciousness is a false flag event in human thought, because consciousness is everything. It's like, you know, a lighter, an object, anything, organic, inorganic. Consciousness is everything. But the thing that separates you and me is our conscience, the ability to do the right thing. And this doesn't mean going out into the world. Well, it helps to go out in the world and have an effect on the world, but it has to be in our own life immediately, and this gets passed on. And then if you go through the litany of reasons why we're in the shitter that we're in, with Fukushima, the nuclear catastrophes that we're going to be facing multiple times in the future now, that are going to get worse and worse, the reason we're in the shitter that we're in is that fundamentally, I have said this too, which is why I like people like Kevin Annett in Canada and many other advocates on behalf of children, the vulnerable, or communities, the Aboriginal communities on our planet who have been decimated, who are being decimated by acid man, white man, coming in with their technologies and decimating them, giving them blankets with polio or smallpox in the diseases. This has been documented, and the reason we're in the shitter we're in is because we're allowing this behavior to continue and it's passed on through the child. The child observes the parent, and the parent, no matter how well-meaning they may be, there is this incredible communication of letting someone down, and children understand this, and they incorporate this into their nature and hopefully have the ability to choose as they become more reflective and thoughtful of doing the right thing themselves, even though the parents didn't. Like inject them with 40 or 50 or even 60 immunizations, vaccinations before they're 15, 16 years old. This is an atrocity. But I'm just talking about the tip of the iceberg here, because to love someone means to truly allow that person to be who they need to be with guidance. And the child understands this. And as long as there are unhappy children, we're going to have a very unhappy future unless we can inspire people to act their conscience. This is the 101, from what I understand, is to be able to pass on this caring, this loving feeling, this respect, this regard for life, fundamentally, it comes through the youth. It comes through our culture, through the youth. And if our culture is corrupt, decrepit, dark, ugly, like I call it, the culture of death, the art that is being produced, art like Francis Bacon, who is exalted. I just looked at a documentary on Francis Bacon. I should probably put this now. I'm not going to put the link on it. It is brutal. This person was totally reflecting the decrepit aspect, and he can do his work. I'm not saying Francis Bacon shouldn't be allowed to do his work. It's the people that promote it and call it beautiful. This is insane. This guy was so deranged. He was a representative of the lowest aspect of our existence, and he's being exalted as an amazing artist. And Damien Hirst was interviewed in this and calls it beautiful. And then he escalates the hypothesis that Francis Bacon, an unloved child, puts forward, and he escalates it into the next level of depravity. And this is what we're stuck with, because children are being abused, and Francis Bacon wasn't a terribly abused child, and the art that he produces reflects that. So I'm saying we need to be able to activate this part in us in order, I'm so committed to exposing the external trouble that we're in through our culture of death in the age of fission. I am committed to exposing this in my work, and it may not look obvious. I mean, if you look at it, I am starting to wrap. The wrapper needs to be unraveled. This mystery, I'm creating my own version of this mystery, and it needs to be unraveled. And what will come out of it will be quite incredible, I believe. I have a lot of faith in that it would be quite incredible. So anyway, we're stuck in the mythologies, in the truth seekers too. This is an epidemic. I find this to be really quite disturbing. The level of truth seeking has now become psychotic almost. I find the whole info, maybe this is getting a bit long, but it transitions for me into the idea of AI, which is real. AI is me talking to you through a digital format. This is AI. And AI has many levels that it is represented in our culture. The fact that people are holding their tablet phones like they're big screens, and they walk into telephone poles because they're looking at their AI devices. AI is real, AI is happening big time, and AI is something that has to do fundamentally with the digitalization of everything. This is the format that I see AI taking. And the idea that we can, the only idea that I can come up with how we overcome this is to insert the humanity, that biology, that organic feeling that we have through being inspired, all those aspects that are not attached to the machine, to the technology. And it's not being a Luddite, it just says, what I'm saying is that we're going to get results if we turn our attention towards that inner world, which has nothing to do with the machine that is being created on the outer world. I think I covered everything.